For 3 weeks. The only smell I knew was antiseptic, and the only sound was a heart monitor. When I finally came home, I expected the scent of fresh laundry and the warmth of family. Instead, I was hit with the coldest betrayal imaginable, and it came from my own son, who had no idea he was just a pawn in his wife's master plan. This is a story about how a father's love sometimes has to be ruthless. Stick around to see how deep the rabbit hole of deception goes. For 21 days, my world had shrunk to the size of a hospital bed. It was a sterile universe of white sheets, the persistent, cloying smell of antiseptic, and the ceaseless, metronomic beep of a machine that tethered me to the living. A triple bypass isn't just an operation, it's a confrontation with your own mortality. You lie there, feeling the alien tug of stitches beneath your skin, and you have nothing to do but think. I thought about my wife, Helen, gone for 5 years now, and how she would have fussed over the nurses and probably tried to redecorate my room. I thought about the empire I'd built from dust and water, and about my son, Ethan, the one I'd have to leave it all to one day. When the car finally turned onto the long gravel path leading to my house, every crunch of the tires felt like a step back into my own life. The late afternoon sun filtered through the canopy of ancient oaks, painting dappled light across the hood. This land, this house, they were more than wood and soil. They were my life's work. A legacy. As I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady. The familiar scent of pine needles and damp Texas earth filled my lungs. It was the smell of home. All I craved was the embrace of my worn leather armchair, a cup of hot, black tea, and the profound silence that Helen and I had cultivated here over 40 years. I pushed open the heavy front door. The familiar creak, a welcome sound. The house was quiet. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light slanting through the tall windows. My hand trailed along the cool, smooth wood of the banister as I walked into the living room. It was exactly as I'd left it. A museum of our shared life. Helen's favorite throw blanket was still draped over the sofa. A stack of my land survey journals sat on the coffee table. This was my sanctuary. I was halfway to my chair, anticipating the blissful sigh of sinking into it, when I heard footsteps pounding down the stairs. It was Ethan. And he wasn't walking, he was practically bouncing. He was dressed in linen shorts and a bright polo shirt, already in the uniform of a man on vacation. He held his phone in one hand, his face glowing with an almost manic energy. It was a stark contrast to the peaceful quiet I had just been savoring. "Welcome home. Dad, perfect timing," he exclaimed, his voice booming in the still house. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and wrapped me in a hug that was a little too strong, making me wince as it pulled at my incision. "Easy, son. I'm still screwed together pretty tight," I managed, patting his back. He pulled away, but the high-wattage smile didn't dim. Sorry. It's just, this is incredible. Seriously. Perfect timing. Isabella and I are off to the Bahamas. First class. The car's coming in an hour. It's all thanks to your old ranch." The words hit me with a physical force. The air in my lungs turned to ice. The Bahamas. Ranch. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt, the edges of my vision blurring. I gripped the back of a nearby sofa to steady myself, the sharp pain in my chest flaring up, a cruel echo of the surgeon's scalpel. He was talking about a honeymoon, a luxury trip, funded by selling a piece of my soul. I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I taught to ride a bike on these very grounds, and I saw a stranger, his eyes shining with a pride that was utterly, terrifyingly misplaced. I didn't have the strength to yell. Rage felt like a distant luxury. Instead, a sound rumbled up from my hollowed-out chest. It was a laugh, a dry, rasping sound, like stones grinding together. It held no joy, only the bitter irony of a man who had stared down death, only to come home to a betrayal delivered with a smile. Ethan's grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "What's so funny? Are you okay?" "Just tired." "Son," I rasped, finally making it to my armchair and letting my weight fall into it. The old leather groaned in sympathy. "Tell me about this. You sold a ranch." He took my quietness as an invitation. He launched into his story, puffing up his chest, pacing in front of the fireplace like a conquering hero recounting his great victory. "Well, while you were, recovering, things got serious here. Someone had to step up and be the man of the house. Isabella. She was an absolute wreck. Dad, crying at night, worrying herself sick over you. Over everything." I watched him, my gaze steady. I didn't interrupt. I noted his phrasing, "be the man of the house." It wasn't how Ethan talked. It was something someone else would say. "She's the one who had the strength to face the facts." He went on, his voice full of a reverence that was clearly meant for his wife. "She dealt with the hospital administration. The insurance company. It was a nightmare. Turns out, your premium plan didn't cover as much as we thought. Not even close. We were looking at a mountain of debt. Dad, I saw the statements myself. It was over $250,000. He shook his head, a theatrical gesture of remembered hardship. I didn't know what to do. But Isabella, she was so resourceful. She said we had assets. We just needed to be smart. That's when she thought of Serenity Creek. My fingers tightened on the arm of the chair. Serenity Creek. He said the name so casually, as if it were a rusty old lawnmower in the back of the shed. It was just sitting there. Right, you haven't used it for anything in years, he said, looking to me for confirmation. So she found a buyer, an investment group from out of state. They were looking to buy land quickly. Nofus. She handled all the negotiations. She protected me from all the stressful legal stuff. We got a great price for it. All things considered. $200,000. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes pleading for approval. It wiped out the medical debt completely. And the rest? Well, Isabella said you'd want us to finally have a proper honeymoon, to celebrate our life together, and to celebrate you being okay. It saved us. Dad, she saved us. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 5. Each resonant dong landing like a hammer blow in the suffocating silence. He had finished his tale. He had laid out his foolishness and his wife's treachery like a banquet. And he expected me to applaud. With a grunt of effort, I pushed myself out of the chair. The pain was a dull, constant fire now. Dad, what are you doing? You need to rest, Ethan said, rushing to my side. I waved him off. I'm fine. My steps were slow but deliberate as I crossed the room to the great oak desk that had been my father's before me. The air around it smelled of wood polish, ink, and time. I pulled open the top right drawer. The sound was a low groan of old wood, sliding on old wood. My hand moved past a tin of old photographs and a collection of fountain pens until it found what it was looking for, a thick, cream-colored envelope bearing the letterhead of my insurance company. I pulled the single statement from within and turned back to my son. I didn't speak. I simply held the paper out to him. He took it. His brow furrowed in confusion. "What's this? More bills." "Just read it," I said, my voice flat. His eyes scanned the document. I watched his face. An open book of emotion I could suddenly read perfectly. I saw his gaze move over the columns of astronomical figures, total charges, plan discounts. And then I saw his eyes lock onto the bottom of the page. The final summary line. The blood drained from his face, leaving his skin a pasty, sickly white. His confident posture dissolved. He looked up at me, his mouth slightly agape, then back down at the paper, as if it were written in a language he couldn't comprehend. I don't understand," he whispered. The paper trembled in his hand. My finger, steady and unwavering, pointed to the box at the very bottom, where the final calculation was displayed in bold, unequivocal print. Read the line. "Ethan, the one that says, total patient responsibility." Read it out loud. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. His voice was a choked, strangled thing when it finally came out. Total, patient, responsibility, $0 and 0 cents. The words hung in the air between us. An indictment. "But it's impossible," he stammered, shaking his head in frantic denial. "Isabella. She showed me the invoices. From the hospital. I saw them with my own eyes. They looked real. They had logos, signatures, everything. It was over $250,000. His voice cracked and trailed off as the terrible, logical conclusion began to force its way into his consciousness. He was a man waking from a dream to find himself in a nightmare. I took the damning piece of paper from his limp fingers and set it down on the table beside my chair. The trap of his wife's lies was beginning to close around his mind, and I felt a grim satisfaction mixed with a deep, aching pity. "She handled the entire sale." "You said?" I asked, my voice still dangerously quiet. "She found this investment group." He could only nod, his eyes wide and glassy with shock. "Did you meet them, the buyers?" He shook his head. "No. She said it was better to keep it simple. She handled everything online." "And the contract?" "Son, did you read it?" He flinched, looking away. She pointed to where I needed to sign. I trusted her. The three most expensive words in the English language. I let his confession hang in the air. A final, damning piece of his own testimony. I looked past him, out the window, at the fading light, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The day was ending, and so was my son's innocence. I turned my gaze back to him, to his shattered expression. "Ethan, you sold the Serenity Creek Ranch for $200,000. I let out a long, slow breath, a sigh that felt like it carried the weight of my entire life. "Oh, son, you have no idea what you've just done. And that's not even the worst part of it." My words fell into the suffocating silence of the room, each one a stone dropping into a deep, dark well. Ethan stared at me, his face a canvas of confusion and nascent terror. The bravado had evaporated, leaving behind a hollowed-out young man, adrift in a reality that was shifting beneath his feet. The last rays of the setting sun bled through the windows, casting long, distorted shadows across the floor, making the familiar room feel alien and menacing. "What? What do you mean?" he finally stammered, his voice thin and reedy. "What could possibly be worse than this? I I was tricked into selling family land to pay off a debt that never existed. I gave away part of our legacy for a lie. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Confronting. Useless motion. What in God's name could be worse? I didn't answer immediately. I let him sit with the question. Let the full weight of his own words settle upon him. I walked over to the liquor cabinet. A piece of dark mahogany that my father had cherished, and poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a heavy crystal glass. My hand was perfectly steady. The amber liquid caught the fading light, glowing like a trapped flame. I didn't offer him any. This was a clarity he needed to face sober. I took a slow sip. The familiar burn, a grounding sensation in the chaos. I turned back to him. You keep calling it the ranch, I said, my voice low and even. You say it as if it were a single, isolated thing. An old barn. A few dusty acres. That's what she wanted you to think. Isn't it? That small. Unused ranch. And Brosen. He just nodded. His eyes fixed on me. Wide, with a desperate need to understand. That's the lie that underpins all the others. Ethan, I continued, swirling the bourbon in my glass. Serenity Creek isn't just a ranch. It's the heart of the entire operation. It's the linchpin. It's the reason any of our other properties have value at all. I saw the incomprehension on his face. He had grown up around this business, but he had never truly looked beneath the surface. He saw the cattle, the crops, the balance sheets. He never saw the source. Your great-grandfather. He wasn't a cattleman. He was a geologist. When he bought this land a century ago, everyone thought he was a fool. It was dry, useless scrub. But he knew something they didn't. He knew about the aquifer, the Edwards Aquifer. Son. A massive underground river. And Serenity Creek. It sits directly on top of the most accessible, most plentiful part of it. I took another sip of my drink, letting the history sink in. On that small, unused ranch, as you call it, there are 3 wells. Not little hand-cranked things for a farmhouse. Industrial-grade, deep-earth water wells. Those wells don't just water our own land. They pump thousands of gallons an hour through a network of underground pipes I laid 30 years ago. They supply the water for the Thompson Main Ranch, the Blackwood parcel, the northern pastures, the southern fields, and even the Harrison place next door. Without the water from Serenity Creek, everything we own, every head of cattle, every acre of corn dries up and turns to dust in 6 months. It's not an asset, Ethan. It's the lifeblood. The color, what little was left of it, drained completely from his face. He looked physically ill, as if my words were poison seeping into his veins. And that's just our own operation, I said, pressing on. The truth had to be excavated, no matter how painful. 15 years ago, when the big drought hit, I signed a contract with Blue River Bottling, a 20-year lease. They pay me for the right to pump a set amount of water each year. They built their entire regional plant 30 miles from here because of that contract. Because of the water under Serenity Creek, I let the final piece of the puzzle fall into place. So you see, son, you didn't sell a piece of land. You sold the pump to the heart that keeps this entire body alive. And the price wasn't what you thought. I paused, setting my glass down on the mantelpiece with a soft, definitive click. The leases alone, between the other ranches and the bottling company, bring in $1.2 million a year. Net. The land, with its established water rights and infrastructure, has a standing valuation of over $15 million. The number hung in the air. It wasn't just a number, it was a physical presence. It was the weight of 4 generations of work, of foresight, of struggle. It was the sound of my father's laughter, the feeling of my wife's hand in mine as we looked out over the fields. It was everything, and my son had sold it for $200,000. He made a sound. A choked, guttural gasp. His legs gave out, and he stumbled backwards, collapsing into the armchair he had so proudly stood before just minutes ago. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. The confident man who had boasted about his trip to the Bahamas was gone. In his place was a broken boy, crushed by a guilt so monumental it was almost too vast to comprehend. No, 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 he mumbled into his hands. Oh, God, what have I done? What have I done? I watched him, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. There was a part of me that wanted to go to him, to comfort him, to tell him it would be okay. But that would have been a lie. It wasn't okay. And he needed to feel the full, unvarnished horror of it. This was a lesson that had to be etched into his very soul. I let him break. I let the sobs turn into ragged breaths. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. The eyes of a man who had stared into the abyss and seen his own foolishness staring back. How could I have been so stupid, he whispered to the room. You weren't stupid. Ethan, I said, my voice softer now, but no less firm. You were in love, and you were blind. But the signs, they were there. I saw them. I just hope to God I was wrong. He looked at me, confused. What signs? Little things, I said, picking up my glass again. Things that seemed off, but were easy to dismiss. Like 6 months ago, when she asked me about the details of my will, she framed it as a question about estate planning. Making sure you were protected. It felt premature, predatory. I recalled another moment, or the time she told your Aunt Sarah that she'd graduated summa cum laude with a degree in art history from Yale. Your aunt, being your aunt, looked it up. Yale has never had an undergraduate art history student with her name. When I casually asked Isabella about it later, she laughed it off. Said she was just joking. That she'd only taken a few classes there. She was a smooth liar. So smooth, you don't even notice the lie until you're miles down the road. Ethan's face was a mask of dawning recognition. His mind clearly replaying 100 small, seemingly innocent moments. I started to have a bad feeling. I confessed, a deep, cold knot in my gut that wouldn't go away. So, when I got the diagnosis for the surgery, I did something about it. I made a call. I walked back to my desk and pulled out a thick, navy blue file folder. It was heavy, dense with paper. I hired someone. Her name is Eleanor Vance. She's not the kind of lawyer you call for a contract dispute. She's the kind you call when you have a problem you need to disappear. She's a problem solver. I placed the folder on the coffee table in front of Ethan. The sound it made was a dull, final thud. I asked her to find out everything there is to know about the woman my only son had married. He stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. He didn't move to open it. He didn't have to. I opened it for him. Her real name isn't Isabella Rossi. I began, pulling out the first page. It's Jennifer Peterson. She was expelled from the University of Pennsylvania in her junior year for academic fraud, forging transcripts. 2 years after that, she was fired from a junior accounting position at a firm in Dallas for embezzling nearly $80,000. The company decided not to press charges to avoid a scandal. But it's all here in a sworn affidavit from her former boss. I laid the next document on top of the first, and this is a restraining order, filed 3 years ago by an ex-boyfriend, a wealthy man, a bit older than her. In his petition, he claims she forged his signature on documents to liquidate over $300,000 of his stock portfolio while he was overseas on business. He got most of it back, but he wanted her legally barred from ever contacting him again. Ethan looked like he couldn't breathe. Each paper I laid down was another shovel of dirt on the grave of the woman he thought he loved. Eleanor's team kept digging. I said, my voice relentless. They found emails. They found her search history. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. Son, this was a meticulously planned operation. She started researching how to sell property for an incapacitated owner the day after I told you both about my heart condition. She created the fake medical bills weeks ago. She found her buyer, or so she thought, and had the sale lined up, just waiting for me to be on the operating table. The pieces were all there. A mosaic of pure, cold-hearted greed. He saw it now. He saw the loving wife. The concerned daughter-in-law was nothing but a mask. A carefully constructed character designed to get her hands on our family's legacy. He finally spoke, his voice hoarse with grief. So the 200,000, it's gone. She has it, along with everything else. I looked at him, my expression unyielding. It was time for the final, brutal truth. It was time to show him that the crime was even more audacious, more insulting than he could possibly imagine. No, Ethan, I said, reaching back into the folder and pulling out one last sheet of paper. It was a copy of a wire transfer confirmation. She didn't sell it for $200,000. I placed it in front of him. He flinched, but forced himself to look. He saw the name of the shell corporation that had bought the ranch, and he saw the amount. She sold it for $2 million. I said, the words hanging like icicles in the air. The $200,000 she so graciously gave you to pay off my non-existent debt and fund your little vacation, in her email to the buyer. She called that your finder's fee, a little tip for the fool who handed her the keys to the kingdom. I let that sink in. The ultimate humiliation. He wasn't her partner. He wasn't even her mark. He was just a tool, rewarded with pocket change. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a near whisper, delivering the final blow. And one last thing. Her flight to the Bahamas, the one she booked on your credit card, it was a decoy, a ghost. She's not in the Bahamas. Son, her real flight left from a different airport 2 hours ago. She paid for it in cash. I paused, watching the last vestiges of hope die in his eyes. She's on her way to the Cayman Islands. The words Cayman Islands settled into the deepening twilight of the room, not with a bang, but with the dead, the final weight of a coffin lid being sealed shut. It was a name synonymous with one thing, money that was meant to disappear forever. Ethan stared at me, his face a hollow mask of despair. The last, fragile thread of hope that this was a mistake. A misunderstanding that could somehow be undone had just been decisively severed. He looked smaller in the large armchair, physically diminished by the sheer scale of the catastrophe. He finally found his voice. Araf. Despérate rasp. Then, that's it. It's over. He pushed himself to his feet and began to pace, his movements frantic and uncoordinated, like a caged animal. She's gone. The money's gone. The ranch. Oh my God. The ranch. We have to do something. We have to call the police. Call the banks. Call someone. We have to freeze her accounts. Cancel the sale. We have to stop her. His voice was escalating with each word, climbing towards a hysterical peak. He was a man drowning, grasping for any piece of wreckage to cling to. I remained perfectly still. Watching him, I let his panic fill the room. Let it swirl around us like a storm. When he finally stopped, breathing in ragged gasps, his hands tangled in his hair, I raised my hand. A simple, calming gesture. "No," I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria with a quiet authority that made him freeze. "We don't have to do any of that." He looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. "What are you talking about, Dad? Did you hear me? She has $2 million. She's running." "I heard you, son," I said, taking a slow step towards him. I looked him directly in the eye. And for the first time since I'd walked through that door, I let him see past the tired, recovering patient. I let him see the man who had built an empire from nothing. We are not going to call anyone. We are not going to freeze anything. And we are most certainly not going to try and cancel the sale. We don't have to do a single thing, because I already did. The certainty in my voice stopped him cold. His frantic energy dissipated, replaced by a profound, shell-shocked confusion. He sank back into the chair, his eyes searching my face for an explanation that his shattered mind couldn't begin to formulate. "The man who bought the ranch," I began, my tone deliberate, laying out each word like a card in a high-stakes game. "The one who called himself Daniel Rodriguez, the supposed representative for that faceless investment group, his name isn't Daniel Rodriguez." I let the statement hang in the air. A new mystery. "His real name is Marcus Thorne." Ethan's brow furrowed. The name was familiar. A ghost from his childhood. "Marcus Thorne, your old partner, the one who moved to Colorado." "He never moved to Colorado." I corrected him gently. "He retired to a ranch just outside of Austin 2 years ago. We have lunch every other Tuesday. He's been my closest friend and most trusted business partner for 30 years. And for the last 3 weeks, he's been the best actor I've ever had the pleasure of working with." The foundation of Ethan's reality cracked a little more. This wasn't just a tragedy anymore. The shape of it was changing into something he couldn't recognize. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Why would Marcus?" "Because I asked him to," I said. "To help him understand, I had to take him back." The day before my surgery, Eleanor called me at the hospital. Her team had just uncovered an encrypted email from Isabella to an offshore bank inquiring about the procedures for opening a multi-million-dollar non-resident account. That was it. That was the proof that her intentions were not just opportunistic, but predatory. She wasn't just thinking about it, she was planning her exit. My voice grew cold with the memory. Lying in that hospital bed, with the hum of machines all around me, I had a choice. I could have Eleanor call her, confront her, scare her off. I could have stopped the sale before it ever began. I paused, letting him absorb the image. But I knew Isabella. I knew her type. If I had simply blocked her, she would have twisted it. She would have played the victim. She would have told you I was a paranoid, controlling old man, trying to sabotage your marriage out of spite. She would have poisoned you against me. Maybe for good. I would have saved the ranch, but I might have lost my son. My gaze met his, and he saw the painful truth in my words. So, lying there, I made a different choice. I told Eleanor, "No, don't stop her. Let her proceed." In fact, I told her, "Help her." Oh? Ethan's jaw dropped. The sheer audacity of the idea was incomprehensible to him. You let this happen." "I didn't just let it happen, son," I said, a hard edge creeping into my voice. "I orchestrated it. I turned her con into my trap." I explained how Eleanor, within an hour of my call, had contacted Marcus, how they had created the entire persona of Daniel Rodriguez, a slick, slightly greedy foreign investor who was more interested in a quick deal than in due diligence. They set up a shell corporation, complete with a professional-looking website and fake credentials. It was Marcus's voice on the phone with her, his emails in her inbox. They intentionally offered her a price $2 million that was outrageously high for a small, unused ranch, but tantalizingly low for a property whose true value she couldn't possibly comprehend. It was the perfect bait. It made her feel smart, like she was the one pulling a fast one. We gave her every piece of rope she needed to hang herself. I said, opening the file again and spreading more documents on the table. She wanted a forged title deed to speed up the process. Eleanor's office drafted one so perfect it would have fooled a forensics expert. She needed a way to bypass the usual escrow wait times. Marcus's company had a provision for direct wire transfers for expedited acquisitions. Every corner she wanted to cut. We paved the way for her. Every lie she told, we pretended to believe. I picked up a small digital voice recorder from my desk, the one I'd had on the table when he first walked in. A small, blinking red light on its side showed it was still active. His eyes widened as he realized its significance, and every step of the way, we documented it. We have recordings of every phone call she made to Marcus. We have every email she sent, boasting about how she was handling her naive husband and her dying father-in-law. We have a digital paper trail a mile long, cataloging her every criminal act, all in her own arrogant words. Ethan stared at the recorder, then at the papers, then back at me. He was looking at me differently now, not with fear, but with a dawning, terrifying sense of awe. He was finally seeing the chess player, not just the pawn. But it's still just fraud, he said, his mind struggling to keep up. She's in another country. Can they even get her back? I said, a grim smile touching my lips for the first time. That's the beauty of the trap. Son, this stopped being a simple fraud case the moment she hit send on that wire transfer. I leaned in, my voice dropping, explaining the final, brilliant move. When you move more than $10,000 of illicitly gained funds from a federally insured U.S. bank across international borders to an offshore account for the purpose of evading taxes and concealing the origin of the funds, it stops being a state crime. It becomes a federal crime. Wire fraud, money laundering. That carries a sentence of up to 20 years in a federal penitentiary. And the United States government has extradition treaties with the Cayman Islands for exactly these kinds of financial crimes. The scope of it finally dawned on him. This wasn't about getting the money back. This was about bringing the full, crushing weight of the federal justice system down on one pathologically greedy woman. Her flight to the Bahamas was a clever touch. I'll admit, I continued, my tone one of clinical appreciation. But Eleanor's team was never tracking her tickets. They were tracking her phone's location. We watched her drive right past the international terminal and go to a private airfield on the other side of the city. We had her real flight number before her plane even left the ground. I walked over to the window and looked out into the darkness. The stars were beginning to appear in the vast Texas sky. She thinks she's free. She thinks she's won. She's probably sitting in a first-class seat right now, sipping champagne, imagining the life she's going to lead, a life built on the ashes of our family. I turned back to him. But here's the last piece. Ethan, the account she opened in the Caymans, the one she's flying towards, with $2 million waiting in it. Eleanor has friends. Friends in the Treasury Department. The account was flagged the moment it was opened under the Patriot Act. Any large, unverified international transfer gets a second look. Eleanor just made sure ours got a first, second, and third look. The moment Marcus's wire transfer for $2 million landed in that account this afternoon, it triggered an automatic, inescapable federal freeze. I let the finality of that statement sink in. So, she's flying to a bank to access a fortune that has already been turned to stone. The money is frozen. The authorities there have already been alerted by the Department of Justice. They're just waiting for her to walk into the bank and try to access it. Just as I said the words, a vibration sounded on the end table next to my chair. My phone. The screen lit up the dark corner of the room. It was a text message. I walked over and picked it up. It was from Eleanor. The message was short, precise, and utterly devastating. She's landed. Made a stop at the hotel. Now at the bank. Account access denied. She's making a scene. Local authorities are on site. It's a go. Or. I looked up from the phone, my eyes meeting my son's across the dimly lit room. A cold, righteous calm settled over me. The wait was over. The trap was sprung. She just tried to make her first withdrawal. I said, my voice quiet and steady. They're waiting for her. I took a deep breath. It's time. My words, it's time, hung in the charged air between us, heavy with unspoken finality. The storm of revelation had passed, leaving behind a strange, preternatural calm. Ethan sat frozen in the armchair. His eyes, wide and reflecting the dim light of the room, were locked on my face. He wasn't just looking at his father anymore. He was looking at a strategist, a puppeteer, a man who had been moving pieces on a board he never even knew existed. The awe on his face was mingled with a terrifying respect. He watched me as I calmly scrolled through my contacts and found Eleanor's name. My thumb hovered over the screen. In that infinitesimal pause, a lifetime of memories flashed through my mind. Ethan's first steps on the lawn outside. The day I taught him how to read a land survey. His small finger tracing the contour lines. The hollow ache in my chest, the day he brought Isabella home. So proud. So sure. And the cold, instinctive feeling I'd had that something was wrong. A feeling I had dismissed as a father's overprotectiveness. This phone call was not an act of vengeance. Vengeance is a hot, messy thing. This was an act of surgery. A precise, calculated, and necessary excision of a cancer that had metastasized within my family. I pressed the call button. The phone rang only once before she picked up. Eleanor's voice was exactly as it always was, crisp, calm, and devoid of any discernible emotion. Clyde. Eleanor. I responded. My own voice. A low, steady echo of her professionalism. I glanced at Ethan. He was holding his breath. his knuckles white, where he gripped the arms of the chair. There was no need for pleasantries. No need for explanation. We had rehearsed this. We knew the script. The curtain was rising on the final act. "It's a go," I said, the two words feeling impossibly heavy. Impossibly final. Execute. There was a brief pause on the other end. Not of hesitation, but of acknowledgement. "Understood," she said. "Consider it done." And then the line went dead. I lowered the phone and placed its screen down on the table beside me. The deed was done. The signal had been given. Half a world away. Wheels were turning that could not be stopped. A life was about to be irrevocably dismantled. And it was my will that had set it all in motion. Ethan finally let out the breath he'd been holding. It came out as a ragged shake-a-say. "What? What happens now?" he asked. His voice barely a whisper. I didn't answer right away. I walked over to the window and looked out into the impenetrable blackness of the Texas night. I could picture the scene as if I were there. And I painted it for him in the quiet of the room. "Right now," I began, my voice a low murmur. "She's probably still at the bank teller's window. Her initial confusion has likely turned to outrage. She's demanding to see a manager. Her voice is loud, imperious. She's talking about her powerful husband, her wealthy family. She's dropping names and threatening lawsuits. The mask of the sweet, concerned wife is gone, stripped away by the raw panic of being denied what she believes is hers. The bank manager is calm, apologetics, but firm. There's a federal hold on the account. He explains. It's out of his hands. I could see her face in my mind's eye. The carefully constructed beauty contorting into an ugly sneer of entitlement. She doesn't believe it. She thinks it's a mistake. A clerical error by some incompetent island banker. She storms out of the bank, pulling out her phone to call her high-powered lawyer a lawyer. Of course, who doesn't exist. And as she steps out onto the warm, humid street, under the palm trees and the foreign stars, two people will approach her. They won't be in uniform. They'll be dressed in neat, unremarkable business attire. A man and a woman. They will address her by her real name. Jennifer Peterson, they will say. And in that single moment, her entire world will collapse. The shock on her face will be absolute. They will inform her that they are agents of the United States Department of Justice, working in conjunction with local authorities. They will tell her she is being detained pending extradition for the crimes of wire fraud and money laundering. Her brittle confidence will shatter. The threats will die in her throat. She will see that there is no one to bribe, no one to intimidate. There is only the cold, impersonal, and inescapable machinery of the law, and then she will feel the cold, simple click of handcuffs around her wrists. And just like that, her grand escape, her life of stolen luxury, will be over before it ever began. I finished my narration and turned back to face my son. He was staring at the floor, his face pale. The vicarious triumph I thought he might feel was absent. Instead, he just looked, hollowed out. He looked like a man surveying the rubble of his own life. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a terrible, agonizing question. "Why, Dad?" he choked out. "Why did you let it go this far? You knew. You knew what she was. You could have stopped it. You could have just told me." It was the question I had been waiting for. The one I knew I had to answer. This was the moment that would either save our relationship or sever it forever. I walked over and sat down in the chair opposite him. the space between us filled with the ghosts of his dead marriage. Because I know you. Ethan, I said gently, and because I knew her, if I had simply stopped the sale, if I had come to you with a folder full of accusations against the woman you loved, what would you have done? You would have defended her. You would have told me I was a paranoid old man, bitter and jealous of your happiness. And she would have been magnificent. I leaned forward. She would have cried. She would have told you how deeply my accusations wounded her. She would have twisted every piece of evidence into a misunderstanding, a coincidence, a lie told by her jealous ex-boyfriends. She would have painted me as the villain, a tyrant trying to control your life. And you, because you loved her and wanted to believe in the goodness you thought you saw, you would have believed her. She would have driven a wedge between us so deep, so poisonous, that we might never have recovered. She would have isolated you from me. And then, when the time was right, she would have found another way to strip you of everything. This way was absolute. It was undeniable. It had to be her own actions, her own greed, that condemned her in your eyes. Not my words. The truth of my explanation settled over him. He knew I was right. He closed his eyes, and a single tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek. Then another. Soon, he was crying again. But these were not the sobs of a man who had been duped. These were the tears of a man mourning his own judgment, his own blindness. I'm so sorry. Dad. He wept, his voice thick with shame. I'm so sorry. I wanted to be. I wanted to prove I could handle things, that I was a man. She saw that. She played on it. And I let her. I was so proud of myself for this. For selling our legacy. I'm so sorry. His apology was a raw, painful confession, and it lanced a boil of resentment in my own heart that I hadn't even realized was there. I stood up, walked over to him, and placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. He flinched, but I kept it there. A firm, grounding pressure. Don't apologize for being trusting. Son, I said, my voice rough with an emotion I rarely allowed myself to show. That comes from your mother. It's a good thing. Don't ever let the world beat it out of you. I squeezed his shoulder. Apologize for being blind, for choosing not to see the signs that were right in front of you, but that's a mistake you only make once. Now, your eyes are open, and that's all that matters to me. We stayed like that for a long moment. A father and a son in the quiet aftermath of a war. The grandfather clock chimed the hour. Its steady, familiar rhythm, a comfort in the wreckage. Eventually, he scrubbed at his eyes and looked up at me, his expression shifting from grief to a practical dawning concern. What happens to the ranch? The sale? Is it real? I gave him a reassuring smile. The sale is already being voided. Eleanor is filing the motion in the morning. Since the entire transaction was predicated on criminal fraud, it's legally null and void. Marcus will get his $2 million back from the frozen account, and the title to Serenity Creek will be returned to the Thompson Family Trust, where it belongs. It will be like it never happened. I paused. As for Isabella or Jennifer, I should say she'll be held in the Caymans until the extradition paperwork is complete. Then she'll be flown back to Texas to face a federal judge. It's out of our hands now. It's in the hands of the U.S. Attorney's Office. A final, terrible thought seemed to occur to him. Me, he said, his voice barely audible. I signed the papers. Am I? Am I an accomplice? I looked down at the small, black digital recorder, still sitting on my desk, its tiny red light still blinking patiently. I walked over, picked it up, and pressed the button. The red light went out with a soft click. "No, son," I said, turning back to him and placing the device in the desk drawer. "We have your full, recorded testimony, given freely, detailing how you were lied to, manipulated, and coerced through fraudulent means. In the eyes of the law, and in my eyes, you are a victim here, not an accomplice. You are the primary witness for the prosecution." The relief that washed over his face was so profound, it was like watching a physical weight being lifted from his shoulders. He finally, truly, understood that he was free. I walked back to the window. The moon had risen, casting a pale, ethereal light over the familiar landscape. The silhouettes of the ancient oak trees stood like silent sentinels, watching over the land as they had for centuries. "A legacy, Ethan," I said quietly, more to myself than to him. "It isn't just about the land or the money. It's not about what you leave behind. It's about what you protect. It's about having the wisdom to see the threats coming, and the strength to do what's necessary to defend what you love." He came and stood beside me, his shoulder brushing against mine. We looked out at the same view, but we were two different men than we had been just an hour before. The silence that settled between us was no longer one of tension or of secrets. It was a new quiet, a quiet of understanding, a quiet of a bond that had been shattered and then forged anew in the fires of a terrible truth. The road ahead would be long, but for the first time in a very long time, I knew we would walk it together.